"That slut's cheating on you with the priest," the little beggar girl blurted out to the millionaire in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral, where his wife went every day. Then, when he follows his wife, he discovers something that makes him weep on his knees. Leave a comment giving my story a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The morning sun streamed onto the worn stone steps of St. Patrick's, creating shadows that danced between the steps where a small figure settled every day. The 4-year-old girl, with a frail body that made her look barely 2, watched the hustle and bustle of the big city with eyes that sparkled with an intelligence unsettling for her age. Her disheveled hair framed a thin face, marked by hunger, but her eyes remained alert, cataloguing every person who passed, every gesture, every expression. It was there, on those cold steps, that she had learned to survive. Her small hands extended, begging for spare change, but her eyes did much more than plead for compassion. They studied, analyzed, deciphered the secrets that people carried on their faces. She had developed an impressive ability to read human intentions, a necessity that life on the streets had imposed since her earliest days of awareness. That particular morning, as on all others of the past few months, she saw the man approach. Tall, elegant, wearing clothes that cost more than she could gather in years of begging. His dark hair was always perfectly styled, and his movie-star looks caught the attention of any woman who crossed his path. But it was in his eyes that the girl could see something that other people missed. A deep sadness, a weight that seemed to crush him from within. The 30-year-old millionaire always stopped in the same spot, near the stone pillar in front of the cathedral's main entrance. He stood there, discreetly observing, as his wife ascended the steps with determined steps. The 28-year-old woman had a serene, almost angelic face, and always carried a small brown leather satchel. Her gestures were delicate, her posture demonstrated devotion, and she greeted Father Michael with a respectful smile before disappearing inside. It was at this moment that something happened that deeply intrigued the little observer. The handsome man, who clearly possessed considerable wealth judging by his gold watch and the luxury cars that different chauffeurs brought to pick him up, let tears escape. They were not dramatic or ostentatious tears. They were silent drops that trickled down his face as he stood motionless, watching the door through which his wife had entered. The girl did not fully understand what those tears meant, but her intuition told her that something was wrong with that scene that was repeated daily. The man remained there for exactly 45 minutes, always consulting the same expensive watch on his wrist until his wife reappeared through the main door. Then, as if a switch were flipped, he quickly wiped his face, straightened his shoulders, and walked to her with a smile that seemed forced. During her 3 months of constant observation, the girl had noticed patterns that began to form a puzzle in her sharp mind. The wife always entered promptly at 9 in the morning, but there was something in the way she moved that did not match someone who was really going to pray. Her steps were too hurried, her eyes too alert, as if she were constantly checking to see if she was being watched. Father Michael, a charismatic 45-year-old man known throughout the area for his community outreach, also showed strange behaviors on those specific days. He always finished his morning activities with excessive haste when the millionaire's wife arrived and carried a dark leather backpack that he did not carry on any other day of the week. The little beggar had developed the habit of mentally counting the time that the wife remained inside the church. Theoretically, a devout person who visited the temple daily should spend at least 30 minutes in genuine prayer, but something didn't add up. The woman entered at 9 and left exactly at 9:45, but there were times when she clearly wasn't inside. It was on a Tuesday morning that the first truly significant discovery happened. The girl had changed her usual position on the steps to a location that gave her a partial view of the back of the church. To her surprise, she saw the millionaire's wife leaving through the back door at 9:20, carrying the same dark backpack that Father Michael carried in the morning. The woman looked carefully around before disappearing down a narrow alley that led to a poorer part of town. 20 minutes later, promptly at 9:40, she returned through the same back door, stashed the backpack somewhere the girl couldn't see, and then exited through the main door, greeting Father Michael as if she had spent all that time in prayer. The little observer's heart began to beat faster. She had discovered something important, something that the handsome man who cried silently every day did not know. But what should she do with this information? Who would believe a 4-year-old beggar girl? And why did it matter so much to her? The answer came when she looked more closely at the millionaire's face that morning. The tears were not just of sadness. There was something deeper there, an anguish that she recognized because she had felt it in her own chest. It was the pain of someone who loves someone but cannot understand why that person acts strangely. At that moment, the girl made a decision that would change not only her life, but also the lives of all the people involved in that daily mystery that unfolded before her curious and intelligent eyes. The beggar girl's decision to approach the millionaire wasn't made impulsively. For an entire week, she observed every detail of his routine, studying the best time to approach that man who clearly carried considerable wealth, but also a deep pain. She knew she would only have one chance, and that her words would need to be chosen carefully. On the following Thursday morning, when the man took his usual position near the stone pillar, the small figure rose from the steps with determined steps. Her legs, weak from malnutrition, carried her to him, and with the brutal honesty that only children possess, she gently tugged at the hem of his expensive suit. "You cry every day because your wife doesn't stay at the church," she said in her small but firm voice. "She goes out the back and comes back before you notice." The millionaire looked down, his eyes meeting the girl's for the first time. At first, an expression of disbelief crossed his face. This frail child, with torn clothes and a dirty face, was making an accusation about his wife? His first reaction was irritation, but something in the seriousness of those childish eyes made him hesitate. "Little one, you don't know what you're talking about," he replied, trying to keep his voice gentle despite his discomfort. "My wife is a very religious woman. She comes here every day to pray." The girl shook her head with a conviction that surprised the man. "No, sir. She goes in at 9, goes out the back at 9:20 with a black backpack, comes back at 9:40 without the backpack, and leaves through the front at 9:45. Father Michael acts strange on the days she comes too." The child's words hit the millionaire like a punch in the gut. The details were too specific to be invented by a child's mind. He crouched down to be at the girl's height, his heart beginning to beat faster in his chest. "How do you know this?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "I stay here every day. I see everything," she replied simply. "You love her, but she's hiding something. That's why you cry." At that moment, the millionaire's world began to crumble. For 2 years, since inheriting the family construction company after his father's sudden passing, he had blindly trusted his wife. His excessive loyalty had always prevented him from suspecting the people close to him, a trait he considered a virtue, but which was now revealed to be a dangerous vulnerability. "Are you sure of what you're saying?" he insisted, looking for any sign of uncertainty on the child's face. "Yes, sir. If you want, you can give me a little money and I'll show you exactly what she does," said the girl, her need for survival mixing with a genuine desire to help that man who suffered in silence. The millionaire remained silent for long minutes, processing the information. His mind, accustomed to analyzing investments and closing million-dollar deals in his company, now struggled to comprehend the possibility that his own wife might be lying to him. The weight of the family inheritance, the profits of the construction company, all the investments in stocks he had made to secure the couple's future, all this seemed insignificant in the face of the suspicion that grew in his chest. "What's your name?" he asked finally, taking his wallet from his pocket. "I don't really have a name," replied the girl. People call me different things, but you can call me whatever you want." The man felt a pang in his heart. That child, who had just completely shaken his reality, didn't even have the basic dignity of a proper name. He took some bills from his wallet, more money than the girl had seen in her entire life. "I want you to show me exactly what my wife does when she goes out the back of the church," he said, his voice filled with a determination he hadn't felt in months. "But first, you're going to get something to eat. I can't accept help from someone who is clearly starving." The girl took the money with trembling hands, her eyes filling with tears of gratitude. She had never experienced so much kindness from a stranger, and something inside her connected with that man in a way she couldn't explain. The next day, the millionaire arrived earlier than usual, finding the girl already positioned in a strategic location that gave her a view of both the main entrance and the back of the church. She had used some of the money to buy clothes that were a little less torn and seemed to have gained some strength after a proper meal. "She'll be here in 5 minutes," whispered the girl. "You need to hide behind that bigger pillar so she doesn't see you." The man followed the little guide's instructions, his heart beating so hard he was sure everyone around could hear it. Promptly at 9 o'clock, his wife appeared, greeted Father Michael with her usual gentle smile, and entered the church. Exactly 20 minutes later, the girl discreetly squeezed the millionaire's arm. "Now," she whispered, "look at the back." What he saw confirmed his worst fears. His wife was leaving through the back door, carrying a backpack that she definitely didn't have when she went in. She looked carefully around, and for a terrible moment the millionaire thought he had been discovered, but the woman simply walked down a narrow alley that led to a part of town he had never visited. "Let's follow her," he said impulsively, but the girl held his hand. "No, sir. She'll notice. It's better to wait for her to come back. I already know where she goes. I can take you there later." During the next 20 minutes, the millionaire experienced an anguish he had never felt. All his fortune, all his investments in bitcoins and treasury bonds, none of that mattered at that moment. His emotional life was collapsing, and a 4-year-old girl was the only person in the world who seemed to understand his pain. When his wife returned through the back and exited through the main door with her usual serene smile, greeting him as if she had spent 45 minutes in deep prayer, the millionaire felt a mixture of anger and despair that threatened to consume him. "Do you believe me now?" asked the girl, observing the devastated expression on the man's face. He nodded, unable to speak. His excessive loyalty, which he had always considered a virtue, had become his greatest weakness. For 2 years, he had blindly trusted his wife, while she was apparently leading a double life right under his nose. "You said you know where she goes," he murmured finally. "Can you take me there?" The girl nodded, but there was something in her expression that intrigued him. "Yes, sir, I can. But you have to promise one thing. No matter what we find out, you're not going to do anything bad to anyone. Promise." That simple question from a child made him reflect on his own intentions. What exactly did he intend to do when he discovered the truth? His entrepreneurial mind was used to solving problems with capital and influence, but that situation required something very different. "I promise," he said, unaware that this promise would change not only the course of his investigation, but also the essence of who he was as a person. The journey to the periphery of New York City was a transformative experience for the millionaire. Sitting in the back seat of his luxury car, with the little beggar girl beside him pointing directions, he drove through neighborhoods he had never set foot in, despite living in that city all his life. The paved and clean streets of downtown gradually gave way to potholed roads, simple houses, and a smell in the air that mixed home cooking with open sewers. "It's there, sir," said the girl, pointing to a narrow alley between 2 precarious buildings. "She always goes in there and stays in a small house with a yard full of kids." The driver parked the vehicle at a safe distance, and the millionaire felt his heart race again. Throughout the week since discovering his wife's betrayal, he had developed insomnia and anxiety, characteristics he had never experienced before. His nights were tormented by terrible scenarios that his mind created to explain his wife's secrets. "Let's get out and approach slowly," he whispered to the girl, who nodded with a seriousness disproportionate to her age. The two walked down the narrow alley, the child guiding the man through a maze of back streets she knew like the back of her hand. The contrast between the millionaire's expensive Italian shoes and the girl's bare feet on the packed earth was a perfect symbol of the distance between their worlds, now united by a quest for truth. When they arrived at the indicated location, the millionaire had to lean against a wall to keep from falling. Through a low wooden fence, he could see his wife in the yard of a simple house, surrounded by at least 15 children who appeared to be between 3 and 6 years old. All were visibly malnourished, wearing patched clothes, but their faces glowed with joy as his wife distributed sandwiches and juice boxes. "She comes here every day to feed these kids," whispered the little guide. "Father Michael helps her. They bring food, medicine, sometimes clothes." Reality hit the millionaire like an avalanche. His wife wasn't having an affair. She was using the family money to do social work in secret. But why hide it from him? Why all the staging at the cathedral? Why the tears he shed every day thinking he was being betrayed? He watched his wife interacting with the children, and for the first time in months saw a genuine smile on her face. It wasn't the polite smile she gave him at home, nor the respectful smile she offered Father Michael at the cathedral. It was a smile of pure happiness, of someone who had found their purpose in life. "Why didn't she tell me about this?" he murmured, more to himself than to the girl beside him. "Maybe she's afraid you won't let her," replied the child with the brutal wisdom of those who live on the streets. "Rich people sometimes don't like it when someone gives their money to other people." The girl's words cut like a blade. The millionaire began to reflect on his own behavior over the past 2 years. Since inheriting the construction company, he had become obsessive about financial control. Every expense was analyzed, every investment questioned. He had turned his home into a place where income spreadsheets and investment reports were constant topics in the couple's conversations. At that moment, one of the children in the yard, a boy who looked to be the same age as his little guide, tripped and scraped his knee. Immediately, the millionaire's wife knelt beside the child, cleaned the wound with maternal care, and comforted him until he stopped crying. The scene awakened something deep in the man's chest, an emotion he couldn't name. "Sir," said the beggar girl, discreetly tugging at his sleeve, "someone's coming." They hid behind a nearby building as Father Michael appeared in the alley, carrying bags of groceries. The 45-year-old man greeted the millionaire's wife with a fraternal hug and began helping with the distribution of food. Their interactions were clearly those of people united by a common purpose. There was nothing romantic or suspicious in their gestures. "How long has this been going on?" asked the millionaire, observing the well-coordinated operation between his wife and the priest. "Since I can remember staying on the cathedral steps," replied the girl. "About 6 months, maybe more. In the beginning, there were only 5 children, but now there are many more." The growing number of children benefiting explained why the mysterious expenses in their joint account had gradually increased over the months. His wife wasn't wasting money or being unfaithful. She was building something meaningful, something that made a real difference in the lives of people who needed it. As they watched, an elderly woman approached the group carrying a large pot. She was followed by 2 other ladies, each bringing contributions to that makeshift social operation. The millionaire realized that his wife had created a support network, a community of people dedicated to caring for the abandoned children of that area. "Do they do this every day?" he asked, fascinated by the group's organization. "Not every day," replied the girl, "but almost every day. And on Saturdays, they bring a doctor to see if the children are sick." The complexity of the operation impressed the businessman. His wife had created something that went far beyond simple charity. It was a structured social project with regularity, planning, and growth. She was applying management principles that he recognized from his own businesses, but directed to helping people instead of generating profits. At that moment, one of the children in the yard, a little girl with curly hair, approached the fence and waved to the little guide who accompanied the millionaire. The two knew each other, and her companion waved back with a shy smile. "Have you ever been cared for by her?" asked the millionaire, a suspicion growing in his mind. The girl shook her head. "No, sir. I stay away from here because I don't want your wife to see me near you. But I know these kids. They live on the streets just like me." The dedication of the little one in keeping the secret of his investigation impressed the man. Even as a child, she had understood the importance of not compromising the operation they were observing. Her intelligence and maturity contrasted painfully with her physical condition, weakened by hunger and abandonment. After 2 hours of observing, the millionaire had seen enough. His wife finished distributing food, helped clean the yard, hugged each child individually, and said goodbye to Father Michael with the same respectful handshake they exchanged at the cathedral. Then she retraced her path down the alley, returning to the car that awaited her on a parallel street. "Now I need to talk to Father Michael," said the millionaire, his voice filled with a determination that mixed relief with confusion. "I need to understand why my wife felt the need to hide this from me." The girl looked at him with concern. "You promised you weren't going to do anything bad, remember?" "I remember," he replied, gently stroking the child's head. "But I need answers, and you're going to help me get them the right way." As they returned through the maze of streets toward downtown, the millionaire reflected on how his life had changed in just 1 week. His wife wasn't the woman he thought he knew, but she also wasn't the traitor he had feared she was. She was something completely different, a person with secrets that were born of goodness, not evil. But that raised even more complicated questions. If she was doing something so noble, why did she feel the need to lie to him? What did that say about the type of husband he had become? And more importantly, how could he deserve a woman who sacrificed her personal comfort to feed abandoned children while he dedicated his energies only to multiplying a fortune that was already more than enough? The answer to these questions would come the next day, when he finally gathered the courage to confront Father Michael and discover truths about himself that would completely transform his understanding of what it meant to be truly rich. The next morning, the millionaire arrived at the cathedral an hour earlier than usual, determined to confront Father Michael before his wife appeared. The little beggar was by his side, now wearing new clothes he had bought for her, but still refusing to accept a proper name. "I like being just me," she had said the night before, with a simplicity that touched the man's heart deeply. Father Michael was arranging the pews when the millionaire entered the cathedral, his footsteps echoing through the silent interior. The charismatic 45-year-old man looked up and smiled, immediately recognizing the husband of one of his most dedicated parishioners. "Good morning, my son. It's rare to see you here so early," said Father Michael, his voice echoing through the empty nave. "We need to talk," replied the millionaire, his voice tense but controlled. "It's about my wife and the activities you carry out together." Father Michael's expression changed instantly. The smile disappeared, replaced by an evident concern. He placed the hymnal he was organizing on the altar and approached slowly, as if he were calculating every word he would say. "I don't understand what you're talking about," said Father Michael, but his tone didn't sound convincing. The little beggar, who had remained hidden behind a pillar, emerged from the shadows and positioned herself beside the millionaire. Her presence seemed to surprise the religious man even more. "Father," said the millionaire, taking a deep breath, "I know about the project in the outskirts. I know that my wife goes out the back of the cathedral every day to feed abandoned children. I know that you help her. What I don't understand is why you both felt the need to lie to me." Father Michael remained silent for long moments, his eyes alternating between the millionaire and the girl. Finally, He sighed deeply and gestured for them to sit on the first pew of the church. "Your wife made me promise that I would never tell you anything," he said, his voice laden with weight. "She was afraid that you would try to turn charity into a business project, removing the human essence from the action." The words hit the millionaire like a punch. "She said that?" "Not in those exact words," replied Father Michael, adjusting his cassock. "But she told me how you reacted when she suggested, in the first year of marriage, that they donate part of the construction company's profits to social institutions. She said that you turned a conversation about helping people into a detailed presentation on tax deduction and social responsibility marketing." The memory returned like a painful avalanche. The millionaire remembered that conversation, how he had interrupted his wife to explain the tax advantages of scheduled donations, how he had suggested hiring a communications company to document their social actions and improve the construction company's image. He had thought he was being smart, strategic. Now he realized he had been cold and calculating. "She wanted the help to be genuine," continued Father Michael. "No contracts, no advertising, no turning the children's suffering into a business opportunity. That's why she decided to act in secret." The little beggar, who had listened to everything in silence, finally spoke. "She loves these kids very much, sir. I've seen how she takes care of them. It's not pretending." "I know," murmured the millionaire, running his hands over his face. "I saw it yesterday. But why didn't she try to explain this to me? Why didn't she give me a second chance to react differently?" Father Michael got up and walked to the window that faced the street, observing the morning movement of the city. "Because you changed a lot after you inherited the company, my son. Your wife told me how you became obsessed with financial control, how every conversation at home revolved around investments and applications. She felt that she had lost the man she married. The truth hurt more than any betrayal he had imagined. For 2 years, while accumulating wealth through stocks and multiplying his assets, he had lost connection with the human values that really mattered. His wife had tried to preserve her compassionate essence away from the corrosive influence of his obsession with money. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. 8 months, replied Father Michael. "It started when she found this little one on the cathedral steps, unconscious from hunger." The millionaire looked at the girl with surprise. "You?" She nodded timidly. "Your wife gave me food and water, but when she offered to take me home, I ran away. I'm afraid of big houses, but she came back the next day and brought food again. That's when she saw other children like me." The story was slowly coming together in the businessman's mind. His wife had found an abandoned child, tried to help her individually, and gradually discovered an entire community of children in a similar situation. Instead of simply making a donation to some existing institution, she had created something personal, intimate, real. "And the secret at the cathedral?" he asked. "Why all the staging?" "Because she needed an excuse to leave home every day," explained Father Michael, "and because she knew you would respect her religious devotion. It was the only lie she allowed herself to tell." At that moment, the sound of familiar footsteps echoed from outside the cathedral. The millionaire's wife was arriving for another day of her secret work. Father Michael looked at the businessman with concern. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. The millionaire looked at the little beggar, who had been the instrument of all those discoveries. In her eyes, he saw the same hunger and abandonment that his wife tried to combat daily. But he also saw intelligence, courage, and a capacity for love that had completely changed his perspective on what really mattered in life. "I'm going to tell her the truth," he said, rising from the pew. "I'm going to say that I discovered everything, and I'm going to ask for forgiveness for becoming the type of man that made her feel the need to lie to protect her goodness." The little one held his hand. "And then, sir?" He looked at her with an expression that mixed determination and tenderness. Then I'm going to learn from her how to be truly rich. And I'm going to make sure you never go hungry again." His wife's footsteps approached the main door of the cathedral. The millionaire took a deep breath, preparing for the most important conversation of his life. He didn't know how she would react to discovering that she had been found out, nor how he would manage to rebuild the trust he had lost through his financial obsession. But one thing he knew for sure: from that day forward, his fortune would have a purpose much greater than simply growing. It would be used to protect and nurture not only his own family, but also the children his wife had chosen to love in secret. The cathedral door opened, and his wife entered with the serene smile that he now knew hid as much suffering as goodness. It was time to start a new life based on truth and genuine love for those who really needed it. But first, he would need to find the courage to admit that he had become exactly the type of person his own wife felt the need to hide from. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving it a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.